Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First things first, my name is Matt Hine, and today I'll be doing a presentation on providing oral presentations of technical material for a non-technical audience. So I guess I've chosen this picture. To me, it sums up really well some of the issues people have with respect to presenting technical information to a non-technical audience. Here we have a professor who's clearly quite knowledgeable with respect to his field of study. He's chosen to present to his crowd or his audience a table or a chart which I find really convoluted. It's hard to decipher and really hard to understand. A bit about myself and background. I'm a qualified mining engineer, more than 10 years experience, and I guess one thing that's really resonated through my career to date hasn't been the ability for talented engineers or technical people to solve challenging problems, but rather articulating and communicating those solutions back to stakeholders in a way that's concise, informative, and entertaining. So what are we about today? What are we trying to achieve? Firstly, I'll look at why it's important to be a good communicator and how we define good, certainly from an engineering context, and why it's important to be really knowledgeable and able and proficient in oral communication. I'll look at what the good do well, mainly from a presentation context, and similarly what the bad do badly, so what we should avoid with respect to presentation techniques when presenting technical information to those from a non-technical background. From there we'll move on to what the good do well, so that's looking at the verbal, non-verbal cues, characteristics, how they present themselves, how they make themselves available to the audience, all those types of tricks of the trade. And into that ties what the bad do badly. So similarly, non-verbal and verbal cues, characteristics, things we should avoid. And then once at the back end, we'll tie all our learnings together, look at the conclusions, recommendations, what you should be able to take away from this presentation, and then certainly any questions. So why is it important to be able to communicate orally and be proficient in it from an engineering perspective, and how do we define it? There's a good quote I found from Morton Rose. I won't read it, I'll allow you to do that. And summary basically looks at why effective communication is really a significant attribute and expectation of engineers in the current workplace. So there's two main reasons why you need to be proficient as an engineer or even as a technical professional. The personal and peer drivers. The personal it's a communicating competency. So like I said, it's a requirement of your job and expectation that you can present technical information to an audience. Secondly, it's important to be able to communicate your ideas, your theories and your work. So it's an education, it's getting other people up to speed and demonstrating and understanding the material you've been working on. And then there's personal motivators, financial and personal success. Numerous studies which have shown and proven that people who are quite competent in the workplace at being able to orally present tend to get a lot more professional opportunities. So it's a good opportunity, I guess, an oral presentation to bring people up to speed with information and also really market yourself and represent your knowledge. And then there's the peer sort of things as well. So it's a key competency as discussed, and it's important to enhance their knowledge. Through that, there's real opportunities, I guess, within the workplace to assist in development and research from an engineering perspective, certainly with technical information. The more people you can get across your work, what you're doing and the inroads you make, the more applications it may have if people understand. And how do we find good? It's a really important concept and similarly bad. Firstly, we'll look at academic peer-reviewed journals. So there has been a lot of work in this area with respect to what constitutes a good presentation and what not so good. We'll tie it together with looking at a bit of testimony and experience, so what I've observed of people who are good presenters and similarly those that aren't. And then there's the pilot survey as well. So that was basically conducted in conjunction with the people who did the course. There are a number of questions. They identified traits which, not coincidentally, tied in really well with some of the learnings and recommendations around the academic peer review. And similarly, that pilot survey provided a gap analysis of things I should focus on with this presentation. So what do the good do well? The pilot survey identified 5 key points. The first one, face-to-face. So make yourself available. Don't be hiding behind a lectern. By being available and presenting yourself to the audience, you make yourself available, exposed, and there's a certain level of engagement that comes with that. So the audience is a lot more receptive when it's face to face. It's a lot more personable, and people like to be able to read visual cues as well. Secondly, simplify the content. So sometimes we can get overcomplicated with solutions. The key to a presentation is for you to be able to impart your knowledge of a subject with the people you're presenting to. It shouldn't be seen as an opportunity to try and represent you've got a superior intellect. If they don't walk away with the messages you're trying to present, then you've failed as a communicator. So really, not dumb it down, but use language which does the terms justice but gets across the key points succinctly. Uncomplicated language, so that leads on from the simplified content, I guess. Don't use jargon. Try and avoid terms that people won't be familiar with. The whole idea is to make the audience comfortable, and to do that you should be using language which they're familiar with, use on a day-to-day basis. Use effective and visual aids, that's number 4, so they can really help support your arguments, what you're presenting and the work you've done. And tie in ideas. People learn in different ways, some people are a lot more visual. The key to the effective visual aids, the effective part, make them simple, make sure they back up your points. If it's a chart, it should be uncluttered. Similarly, diagrams, any ambiguity should be removed. Anyone should be able to pick it up and understand what it is and what it relates to. And then logically sequenced. So if you're doing a presentation, for example, on how to change a car tyre, you wouldn't start with tightening of the spare wheel on the rim. You look at the start, and it's important to follow that because that's how people learn through that sequential manner. In terms of academic material, Paget and Yoder was one I found. There were many. They basically looked at trying to hone in on a few key points, which is really important. That ties into keeping it simple. And testimony experience. Plenty I could have used. I thought Steve Jobs was a really good example of someone whose presentations could have been very technically dense. The iPhone, a lot of componentry, a lot of technology in it. The reason you're so effective was because you simplified the content and really presented information to the audience on how the product can affect them, how it can change their lives, and the applications for them. So it's about demonstrating the self-interest and driving home the points which the audience will care about. Flip side, what did the poor do badly? I like this picture. So I've certainly been through a few of these presentations. 4 points from the pilot survey. Jargon. Avoid those complex terms. If they're not needed, don't use them. Secondly, irrelevant information. So don't put in all this information just to try and extend the time of the presentation. If it doesn't help support any of your points or any of the learnings you want to try and get across, don't include it. It's not required. If people require more information, you can hand it out on the side. Similarly though, and this is important, if they're not understanding key points, by all means, veer off track and bring them up to speed. But don't include information for the hell of it if it doesn't contribute to your argument in any way. Ties in the third point, excessive detail. Once again, keep it succinct. If the information isn't relevant or doesn't need to be there, it shouldn't be. Fourthly, no or poor visual aids. So technical information can be quite dense in a lot of ways and can be quite dry presentation-wise. So if you are going to use visual aids, make sure they're appropriate, not cluttered, like the professor on the first page. They shouldn't need a whole lot of explanation. They should really tie into what you're saying as a speaker. Academic material, Paget and Yoder once again identify it's quite hard as it is to pay attention when being presented technical information. So the easier you make it for the audience, the more effective you'll be in your presentation. And testimony, so experience. I guess what the poor do poorly. I went to a wedding 2 months ago, and the best man speech, it really didn't tick any of what the good do goodly, unfortunately. So he used a lot of jargon, things which within his friendship circle, words they would have understood, but for the majority of the audience had no idea what he was talking about. Probably a good thing. Excessive detail, so some of the stories he used probably weren't quite appropriate for the audience. So once again, be mindful of who you're presenting to. And then no or poor visual aids. That might have been a good thing, I think, with the detail he did provide. But yeah, once again, understand your audience, who you're presenting to, and what you want them to take home and get out of it. What the good do well. So the pilot survey, 4 key points here. The first one, knowledgeable. Understand your topic. There's nothing more off-putting when you're in the audience than someone who doesn't seem to know what they're talking about. Be involved. So a presentation's a two-way street. It shouldn't be you dictating to the audience. There needs to be some level of involvement to develop an understanding. The more they get involved, the more they'll take home. Don't be afraid to answer questions, and like I alluded to before, if they're not understanding basics, certainly veer off and address those issues so you get that knowledge up to speed and up to the base point you need. The more involvement, the better it will be and more effective. Thirdly, persuasive. So this comes down to strategy, understanding what you want to get out of the presentation, what you want to communicate, and the outcomes, and having a very clear plan on how you're going to get that. The examples you're going to use, how you're going to tie it into the audience, all those type of things. And fourthly, confidence. So have a belief in what you're presenting. Confidence is infectious and it's visible as well. There can be nothing more off-putting as an audience member than somebody giving a presentation is mumbling, jittery, quite nervous. It's hard to focus on the message when the person giving the presentation isn't comfortable with what they're doing. With respect to academic literature, Daniels 2009, I like this one, really emphasises using inclusive terms like I and we. Once again, that facilitates the involvement between the presenter and the audience. Testimony-wise, I won't read through that, but I'll allow you guys to review that. But Bill Clinton was a really good example, I think, of what the good do well. Presented quite dry material a lot of the time, such as political policy. But instead of focusing on all the small detail, made it relevant to the person, made it relevant to the voter, and let them understand how policy affected them. So what the bad do call it? Verbal and non-verbal. So incoherent, don't mutter, be really clear with your speech, understand your volume, and also how quickly you're speaking. You might need to slow it down for key terms or notes, or speed it up depending on how you're travelling. Under-prepared, it comes back to being knowledgeable, but even things like understanding where you're presenting, can it support the medium you want, presentations, are there enough handouts, all those type of things. And anxiousness, so it ties into the confidence, but the more confident you'll be, the better it'll go. Anxiousness can be a hard one sometimes, but if you're prepared, you understand your literature, and you've got a plan, that should eliminate the majority of the anxiousness. Academic-wise, Puppers and Hendricks, they basically identify oral presentation, an effective one to include the presenter's mastering skills. So understand your topic, and they also touch on the graphics and visual content. So once again, visual aids to back up what you're saying. With respect to testimony experience, I guess some very poor examples I've witnessed in the workplace have been managers who have tried to present to a workforce at last minute what should have been a very clear and concise message. Because they were underprepared and inundated with questions they didn't see, the message became convoluted, their confidence waned, and it just wasn't effective at all. It was obvious in their body language as well, they were uncomfortable, so it was really hard for the workforce to buy in. So in conclusion, public speaking, it's a skill. It needs to be learned. It's not something that comes natural to a lot of people, so practice makes perfect, particularly for engineers when explaining technical concepts. The more you practice the presentation you're giving, the more effective it should be on the day. Competence itself's been well defined through academic sources. I've listed a few here. There's more in my references. So it's very clear, I guess, at an academic level of what a competent presentation should involve. And if you take anything away from this, PER, so I've tied it together, prepare, the P, that's be knowledgeable, understand your audience, what medium and visual aids you can be using. Secondly, engage, like I said, the two-way street, involve your audience. Involving people facilitates learning, and they'll be a lot more receptive to your ideas if you do that. And secondly, relax. So I couldn't find any literature of people who have died while making a presentation. I doubt you'll be the first. If it doesn't go well, take away learnings from it and change for next time. So remember, presentation's for you. Presentation's not for you, it's for your audience. So don't use it as an opportunity to try and prove your superior intellect. They need to be taking home key points, so facilitate and accommodate them in every way you can. Thank you, and any questions, please feel free to send them through.